In the shadows of medieval Europe, alliances were forged not from friendship, but from fear. For centuries, one power loomed large: England. Its kings dreamed of dominion from the Channel to the Highlands, from Normandy's shores to the castles of Edinburgh. But two nations, divided by sea yet bound by purpose, would stand together in defiance. One, the Kingdom of Scotland, proud, battered, unyielding. The other, France, ancient and powerful, locked in endless war across the fields of Europe. Their bond would outlast kings, crusades, and centuries of blood. It would be called the Auld Alliance, an oath sealed in war and remembered in legend. This is the story of the brotherhood that defied an empire and changed the fate of Britain forever. History remembers battles: Bannockburn, Agincourt, Flodden. But behind every sword drawn was a promise and a fear. In the 13th century, Scotland stood alone against England's growing might. Kings fell, castles burned, and from the south came the shadow of Edward Longshanks, the Hammer of the Scots. To survive, Scotland needed more than courage. It needed allies. Across the sea, France too faced the same enemy. Locked in a 100 Years' War, its fields soaked in English blood. So, in 1295, two crowns signed a pact, one of the oldest diplomatic alliances in history. If England attacked one, the other would strike back. An oath of mutual defense, sealed in ink, iron, and blood. It wasn't just strategy, it was survival. For nearly 3 centuries, whenever England marched north or crossed the Channel, the Auld Alliance would answer, uniting two nations under one promise. As long as there are Scots and French alive, the Auld Alliance shall never die.
It began with betrayal. In 1290, the death of Margaret, the Maid of Norway, left the Scottish throne empty. 13 claimants rose to seize the crown, and to settle the dispute, they turned to England's King Edward I, the Hammer of the Scots. Edward demanded submission before judgment. Scotland's nobles, desperate, divided, agreed. But once Edward placed John Balliol on the throne, it was clear who truly ruled. England didn't crown a king, crowned a puppet. Taxes were drained, orders came from London, and in a single generation, Scotland's freedom, centuries in the making, had been stolen. The Scots rebelled, and their rebellion would awaken a legend. Crossed swords, the shadow of Longshanks. In 1295, Scotland struck back, not just with swords but with diplomacy. Envoys sailed across the North Sea to King Philip IV of France, enemy of Edward I. What they offered was more than friendship, it was a military pact. If England attacked France, Scotland would invade England. If England attacked Scotland, France would invade England. That agreement, signed in Paris, became known as the Auld Alliance, La Vieille Alliance. And though it began as a treaty, it became something deeper. A vow of brotherhood between two kingdoms bound by a common enemy. Castle, the rebellion of Wallace. Edward's armies soon crossed the border. Towns burned, castles fell, and Scotland's crown and pride seemed lost. Then, in 1297, from the mists of Lanark, a man rose. William Wallace, outlaw, soldier, rebel. His cry wasn't just for vengeance, but for liberty. Wallace's army struck like wildfire, ambushing English forces, reclaiming strongholds, and rallying thousands beneath the banner of St. Andrew. At the Battle of Stirling Bridge, he delivered England its first crushing defeat. News of his victory spread to France. King Philip smiled. England had finally been bloodied by its northern foe. The first spark of the Auld Alliance had been lit. But fire consumes as easily as it warms. Edward returned with an army that blotted out the horizon. Wallace was captured in 1305, betrayed and executed in London. His body quartered, his name burned into legend. Yet the rebellion didn't die. From Wallace's ashes, another rose. Crown Robert the Bruce and the alliance renewed. Robert the Bruce, noble, warrior, king. He once knelt to Edward, then turned against him, uniting the clans under his rule. Scotland's crown was back on Scottish soil, but England's armies still marched. In 1314, at the Battle of Bannockburn, Bruce faced Edward II. a battle that would define Scotland's soul. Outnumbered 3-1, the Scots stood behind marshy ground, waiting for the English cavalry to charge. When they did, Bruce's schiltrons, spearmen locked shoulder to shoulder, tore through the enemy. By nightfall, England's army was broken. Scotland was free. In Paris, French bells rang for the victory. Bruce renewed the Auld Alliance, ensuring that the bond, born in desperation, would endure through triumph. Fleur-de-lis France and Scotland, brothers in war. Through the early 1300s, the alliance deepened. French knights trained Scotsmen in siegecraft and tactics. Scottish archers served in French armies. Trade flowed between Bordeaux and Edinburgh. Wine for wool, steel for silk. When France entered the 100 Years' War against England, Scottish warriors crossed the sea to repay their debt. At the Battle of Baugé in 1421, a joint Franco-Scottish army crushed the English, killing the Duke of Clarence, brother of King Henry V. It was a victory that echoed the spirit of Bannockburn, and France never forgot who stood beside them. For nearly 300 years, the Auld Alliance was more than parchment. It was blood, coffin, the cost of brotherhood. But the alliance was not without pain. When England invaded France again, Scotland answered and paid dearly. Coffin, the cost of brotherhood. But the alliance was not without pain. When England invaded France again, Scotland answered and paid dearly. In 1513, James IV of Scotland honored his oath to France by attacking England while Henry VIII was at war on the continent. At Flodden Field, his army, brave but outmatched, was annihilated. The king himself was slain, his body found among the fallen. France mourned their northern brothers, but the pact endured. Through every victory and every tragedy, the Auld Alliance stood as a defiance of empire, a promise that no nation, however small, would bow to tyranny without a fight. Fire legacy of a promise. When the wars ended, the alliance remained, outliving kings, dynasties, and even languages. French wine became a staple in Scottish taverns. French words crept into Scottish speech. And for generations, Scots and French alike referred to each other not as allies, but as family. Even today, over 700 years later, the bond still echoes in ceremony and memory. The French called it l'alliance la plus fidèle, the most faithful alliance. And history agrees. For though kingdoms fall and borders fade, the Auld Alliance stands eternal, a testament that friendship, once sealed in blood, never truly dies.